The rain came down in sheets the night I turned 18, drumming against the roof of my childhood home like a countdown. I stood in the foyer with 2 duffel bags and a cardboard box, my college acceptance letter folded in my jacket pocket, waiting for my father to change his mind. He didn't. Richard Donovan, CEO, self-made millionaire, and the man who taught me to tie my shoes, looked at me like I was a line item he was cutting from a budget. "You're an adult now," he said, his voice flat and businesslike. "Adults pay their own way." My mother had passed 3 years earlier, a sudden aneurysm that left him cold and distant. Before that, he'd been strict but present, the kind of dad who showed up to soccer games and checked my homework. After she died, he became a ghost in a suit, working 16-hour days and measuring everything in profit margins. When I told him I'd been accepted to Columbia on a partial scholarship and needed help with the rest, he called it a handout. "Mom would have wanted me to go," I said, my voice cracking. He stiffened. "Your mother isn't here, and if she were, she'd tell you the same thing I am. Nothing worth having comes easy." He opened the front door and tossed my bags into the rain. I watched them land in a puddle, my laptop bag soaking through, and something inside me broke. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just picked up my things and walked out, my sneakers squelching in the wet grass. Behind me, I heard the lock click into place. I spent that night on a bench at the bus station, my bags piled around me like a fortress. A security guard woke me at dawn and told me to move along. I called my best friend, Carlos, who let me crash on his couch for 2 weeks while I figured out my next move. I deferred Columbia, took out loans, and enrolled at a state school instead. I worked 3 jobs: dishwasher, delivery driver, campus IT support, sleeping 4 hours a night, and eating ramen until my teeth ached. My father never called. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas, not when I made the dean's list or when I graduated summa cum laude. I stopped expecting him to. By 22, I'd taught myself to code, built a portfolio, and landed a junior developer role at a scrappy fintech startup in Austin. The founder, a woman named Priya Shah, saw something in me, maybe desperation, maybe hunger, and gave me equity instead of a higher salary. I worked like a man possessed, debugging code at midnight, pitching features and morning stand-ups, sleeping under my desk when deadlines loomed. Priya used to joke that I was trying to outrun something. She wasn't wrong. The company exploded. Within 3 years, we went from 12 employees to 1,200, and our payment platform became the backbone of e-commerce across Latin America. When we IPO'd, my equity was worth $43 million. I was 25. I bought a mansion in the hills outside Austin. Glass walls, infinity pool, a view that stretched for miles. I hung my Columbia acceptance letter in a frame above my desk, a reminder of the path I didn't take and the one I built instead. I donated to scholarships. I funded community centers. I never forgot what it felt like to sleep on a bench. And I never spoke to my father. Until tonight. The call came from my security team at 8:15. A man was at the front gate, claiming to be family. He'd been there for an hour, refusing to leave. My head of security, Miguel, sounded apologetic. "He says his name is Richard Donovan," Miguel said. "He's insisting he needs to speak with you. Should I call the police?" I sat at my desk, staring at the rain streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, the city lights glowed like a constellation. My hand hovered over the intercom button. I could have said yes. I could have had him removed, filed a restraining order, erased him from my life the way he'd erased me. But curiosity, or maybe something uglier, made me hesitate. "Put him on the camera feed," I said. Miguel switched the monitor to the front gate. The man on the screen looked nothing like the father I remembered. Richard Donovan had been 6'2", broad-shouldered, always in a tailored suit with a Rolex that caught the light. The man at my gate was stooped, gaunt, his hair gone white and patchy. He wore a jacket that had seen better decades, and his hands shook as he gripped the bars. His face was all hollows and hard lines, aged 20 years and 10. I felt nothing, or I told myself I felt nothing. "Let him in," I said. "Escort him to the front door. Stay close." Miguel nodded. "Copy that." I watched on the monitor as the gate buzzed open. My father stumbled forward, looking around at the driveway like he'd stepped onto another planet. 2 security guards flanked him, their expressions neutral. He moved slowly, as if every step hurt, and when he reached the front door, he stood there for a long moment before raising his hand to knock. I opened the door before he could. He looked at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Regret. I couldn't tell. Up close, he looked worse. His cheeks were sunken, his shirt collar loose around his neck. He smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and something sour, like old sweat. "Ethan," he said, his voice hoarse. I didn't move. "You have 5 minutes." He nodded, swallowing hard. Miguel and the other guards stood just behind him, hands folded. My father glanced back at them, then at me. Can we talk inside?" I stepped aside and gestured to the foyer. He walked in slowly, his shoes scuffing against the marble. He looked around at the vaulted ceilings, the chandelier, the spiral staircase, and I saw his throat work. "You've done well," he said quietly. "I had to," I said. "No handouts, remember?" He flinched. "Good." I led him to the sitting room off the main hall, a space I rarely used. It had leather chairs, a fireplace, and a wall of windows overlooking the pool. I didn't offer him a seat. I stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, and waited. He cleared his throat. "I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything." "You don't. But I need help," he said. His voice cracked. "I'm in trouble, Ethan. Bad trouble." I didn't respond. He took a shaky breath and continued. "The company went under 2 years ago. Legal battles, embezzlement charges. Someone on my exec team was cooking the books, and when it came out, the board pinned it on me. I lost everything. The house, the cars, my reputation. I've been living in a motel for the last 6 months, and I can't keep going like this." I watched him the way you'd watch a stranger, detached, clinical. He looked at me with something close to desperation. "I need a place to stay, just for a little while, just until I get back on my feet." The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I thought about the bench at the bus station, the ramen, the nights I fell asleep at my desk because I couldn't stop working. I thought about the lock clicking into place. I thought about the rain. "No," I said. His face crumpled. "Ethan, please. You told me real men don't need handouts. You threw my bags into the rain and changed the locks. You didn't call, not once in 10 years, and now you show up at my gate because you need something?" "I made a mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I did. I was angry after your mother died. I didn't know how to be a father without her, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. You're sorry because you're desperate, not because you were wrong." He shook his head, tears welling in his eyes. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" He opened his mouth and closed it. He had no answer. I walked to the door and held it open. "You need to leave." He didn't move. "I have nowhere to go," he said. "That's not my problem." Miguel stepped forward, ready to escort him out, but my father held up a hand. He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed, and for the first time in 10 years, I saw the man he used to be. Broken, yes, but still my father. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, "but I'm asking you to help me anyway." Something twisted in my chest. I hated that I felt it.
I didn't let him stay. I told Miguel to drive him to a nearby extended stay hotel and put it on my account for 1 week. I gave him $500 in cash and my lawyer's card. Then I shut the door and tried to forget he'd been there. It didn't work. That night I sat in my office with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink, staring at the framed acceptance letter. My phone buzzed. Text from Priya about a board meeting, an investor pitch, a gala I was supposed to attend. I ignored them. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city lights reflected in the wet glass like scattered stars. I thought about my mother. She'd been a teacher, patient and warm, the the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday. She used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, thick and golden, with blueberries she'd buy from the farmer's market. My father would sit at the table in his reading glasses doing crossword puzzles, and she'd tease him about cheating by looking up answers on his phone. They weren't perfect, but they were solid. After she died, he fell apart in slow motion. He stopped doing crosswords. He worked through weekends. He started measuring success in deals closed and revenue generated, as if numbers could fill the space she'd left. I tried to reach him, but it was like shouting into a canyon. And then, on my 18th birthday, he cut me loose. I pulled up his contact in my phone, still saved as Dad, though I hadn't used it in a decade. My thumb hovered over the call button. I didn't press it. Instead, I called my lawyer, Andrea, a sharp woman with silver streaks in her hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She answered on the second ring. "Ethan, it's late. What's wrong?" "I need you to look into someone. Richard Donovan, my father." There was a pause. "Your father?" "He showed up tonight. Says he's broke, that his company collapsed. I want to know if he's telling the truth." "And if he is?" "I don't know yet." Andrea sighed. "I'll have a report by tomorrow afternoon." "Thanks." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. Part of me wanted him to be lying. It would have been easier. But I knew my father. He was a lot of things, but he wasn't a liar. The report came the next day, just as Andrea promised. She sent it via encrypted email, 30 pages of financial records, court documents, and news clippings. I read it twice. It was worse than he'd said. The embezzlement scandal had tanked his company's stock, triggering a cascade of lawsuits and investigations. The board had forced him out, and the legal fees had drained his savings. He'd sold his house to cover settlements, lost his pension in bankruptcy proceedings, and been blacklisted from the industry. The motel he mentioned wasn't even a motel. It was a weekly rental in a part of town where the street lights didn't work. He'd been living there for 8 months. I set the report down and stared at the wall. My mother used to keep a calendar in the kitchen, the kind with little boxes for each day. She'd write reminders in neat block letters, dentist appointments, soccer games, anniversaries. After she died, my father left it hanging there, frozen on the month she passed. I'd walked by it every day for 3 years, watching the ink fade, until the night he kicked me out. I wondered if he still had it. That evening, I drove to the extended stay hotel. It was a low-slung building near the highway, the kind of place where people paid by the week and didn't ask questions. The lobby smelled like stale coffee and cleaning chemicals. I asked the clerk for Richard Donovan's room number. She gave it to me without looking up. Room 118 was on the ground floor, tucked between a vending machine and a laundry room. I knocked twice. After a long moment, the door opened. My father stood there, in a faded t-shirt and jeans, looking smaller than he had the night before. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Ethan, can I come in?" He stepped aside. The room was tiny. A bed, a nightstand, a desk with a broken chair. A microwave sat on top of a mini-fridge, and his few belongings were stacked in a corner. On the desk, I saw a folder of paperwork, a cheap flip phone, and a photograph in a plastic frame. I stepped closer. It was a picture of my mother, taken at the beach when I was 6. She was laughing, her hair blown back by the wind, and I was on my father's shoulders grinning. He looked happy. We all did. "I kept it," he said quietly. "It's the only one I have left." I picked up the frame, running my thumb over the glass. Something tight and angry loosened in my chest. I read the report. Andrea sent it to me this morning. He looked down. "Then you know." "I know you're not lying." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Does that change anything?" I set the photo down. "I don't know." We stood there in silence. Outside, a truck rumbled past. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. My father sat on the edge of the bed, his hands folded, and for the first time since I'd arrived, he looked like he might cry. "I don't expect you to take care of me," he said. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Not because I need something from you, because I owe you that." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw all the years between us, the anger, the silence, the hurt we'd both carried. I didn't make the decision that night. I told my father I'd think about it, and I left. But over the next week, I found myself driving past the hotel at odd hours, parking across the street and watching the lights in his window. I didn't go in, I didn't call, I just watched. Priya noticed. She cornered me in the hallway after a board meeting, her arms crossed and her expression sharp. "You've been distracted," she said. "What's going on?" I hesitated. Priya and I had built the company together, and she knew me better than almost anyone. I told her about my father. Not all of it, but enough. She listened, her face unreadable, and when I finished, she sighed. "You're allowed to be angry, but you're also allowed to forgive him. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." "I don't know if I can." "Then don't," she said. "But don't let him live in your head rent-free either. Make a choice and move on." That Saturday, I was scheduled to attend a gala for the nonprofit I'd started, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. It was a black-tie event at a downtown hotel with donors, press, and a keynote speech I was supposed to give. I almost canceled, but Priya convinced me to go. The ballroom was packed, chandeliers glittering overhead, champagne flowing. I shook hands, posed for photos, and made small talk with investors. Halfway through the evening, I stepped onto the stage to give my speech. I talked about second chances, about the kids who didn't have safety nets, who worked 3 jobs and slept 4 hours a night, who deserved a shot at something better. I talked about the bench at the bus station, the ramen, the nights I thought I wouldn't make it. The room was silent, and when I finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterwards, a woman approached me, older, silver-haired, with kind eyes. She introduced herself as Margaret, a retired teacher. "Your mother would be proud," she said. I froze. "I'm sorry?" She said, "Claire Donovan. She taught my daughter in 3rd grade. Sweetest woman I ever met. She used to talk about you all the time." My throat tightened. "You knew her?" "A little. She passed before I can thank her properly, but she made a real difference in my daughter's life." Margaret smiled. "I just wanted you to know that." She walked away, and I stood there in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by people, feeling completely alone. I thought about the calendar in the kitchen, the photograph in the plastic frame, the man in room 118. I left the gala early. When I got to the hotel, my father's light was off. I knocked anyway. After a long moment, the door opened. He blinked at me, confused, still in his t-shirt and jeans. "Ethan, what are you—" "I'm not doing this because I forgive you. I'm doing it because my mother would have wanted me to." He stared at me. "Pack your things. You're coming home." His eyes filled with tears. He didn't say anything. He just nodded. My father moved into the guest house the following week. It was a small structure at the edge of the property, with a bedroom, a kitchenette, and a view of the garden. I set ground rules. He'd help with the nonprofit, he'd see a therapist, and he'd respect my boundaries. He agreed to all of it, without argument. The first few weeks were awkward. We circled each other like strangers, polite but distant. He worked in the nonprofit's office, organizing donor files and answering emails, tasks that didn't require much interaction. I kept my distance, checking in through Miguel or Andrea, avoiding anything that felt too personal. But slowly, things shifted.
One Saturday morning, I walked into the main house and smelled something familiar: butter, batter, blueberries. I followed the scent to the kitchen and found my father at the stove, flipping pancakes. He looked up when I entered, his expression uncertain. "I found blueberries at the market. Thought I'd make breakfast, like your mom used to." I didn't know what to say. I just sat down at the island and watched him work. He plated the pancakes and set them in front of me, along with a bottle of syrup. They were thick and golden, just the way I remembered. I took a bite. It wasn't perfect, the edges were a little burnt, and he had added too much sugar, but it tasted like home. "Thank you," I said. He nodded, sitting across from me with his own plate. We ate in silence, the morning light filtering through the windows. After that, breakfasts became a routine. He'd make pancakes, I'd make coffee, and we'd sit together, not saying much, but not needing to. He started working in the garden, planting tomatoes and peppers and herbs, his hands steady in the soil. I'd find him out there in the evenings, kneeling by the raised beds, and sometimes I'd sit on the patio and watch. One night, 3 months in, he asked if I wanted to help. I grabbed a pair of gloves and knelt beside him, digging holes for seedlings. The dirt was cool and damp, and the air smelt like jasmine. "I should have been there," he said quietly, not looking at me. "After your mom died, I should have been there for you. Instead, I shut down. I thought if I could just work hard enough, I could fix everything. But you can't fix grief with a spreadsheet." I didn't respond right away. I planted a seedling, pressing the soil around its roots. "You hurt me," I said, "and I'm not going to pretend you didn't." "I know. But I'm not going to carry it forever either." He looked at me then, his eyes red-rimmed. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not, but I'm giving it to you anyway." He nodded, his throat working. We kept planting. 6 months later, the nonprofit hosted a big fundraiser at the mansion. Donors, students, press, everyone was there. My father helped set up, arranging chairs and greeting guests, his confidence returning little by little. During the event, I gave another speech, and this time, I saw him in the back of the crowd, watching. When I finished, he was the first to clap. Afterward, we stood on the patio looking out at the garden. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine, and the peppers glowed red and yellow in the setting sun. "I'm proud of you," he said. "I should have said that a long time ago." I looked at him, this man who'd been a stranger, then an enemy, and now something in between. He wasn't the father I'd wanted, but he was the father I had. "I know," I said. We stood there as the sun dipped below the hills, the sky turning gold and pink. In the garden, the seedlings we'd planted were growing, roots digging deep into the soil. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was ours. And for the first time in 10 years, that was enough. A year later, I framed the calendar. Not the one from the kitchen, that had been lost long ago, but a new one, custom-made, with photos of my mother, my father, and me. I hung it in the guest house, above the small desk where my father worked on donor files and wrote thank you notes. On the wall beside it, I hung the photograph from the beach, the one of all of us smiling. He saw it one morning and stopped, his hand resting on the frame. "She'd be happy we're trying," he said. I nodded. Yeah, she would. Outside, the garden was in full bloom, a riot of color and life. We'd planted more than vegetables. We'd planted something bigger, something that grew in the spaces between us. Forgiveness, hope, a second chance. Real men don't need handouts, but they do need grace. And sometimes grace is the hardest thing to give.